My name is Felicia Vale, 48 years old. I woke before the birds, staring into the dull glow of my computer screen, as if the columns of numbers could steady my hands. The office smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner, a smell that usually meant control. Today it only reminded me how long I'd been trying to hold everything together. I run a small accounting practice from home. Steady, careful, the sort of work you can measure and balance. Except nothing in me felt measured or balanced. Outside, the yard was still dark, but I could already picture the rows of white chairs we'd rented, the rose-draped arch I coaxed to life all spring, the string lights I'd checked so many times I could recite the pattern of the bulbs like a prayer. It was the morning of my son's wedding. The day should have been a ribbon of light pulling us forward. Instead, every second thudded in my chest like a warning. 25 years of marriage to Arthur. 23 years of mothering our boy, Garrett. I built our life the way I build a ledger, line by line, no extravagance, steady deposits of care. Arthur was the charm, the sparkle, the toastmaster who knew everyone, loved by everyone. I was the floor he stood on. I used to think that was enough for me. Lately, the floor felt like thin ice. The door creaked. Garrett stood there in pajama pants and an old college tee, a mug swallowing both of his hands. He looked like he'd been awake all night. Under the kitchen light, people always told me he had his father's face, clean jaw, easy smile. But in the sober pool of my desk lamp, I saw my own caution living behind his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "you've been up for hours." "So have you," I tried to tease, closing the laptop, though my fingers didn't quite obey. "Big day jitters." He set the mug down and perched on the edge of my desk like he used to when he was little, feet tapping wood. For a second, he was 5 again, asking if monsters were real. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think Brenda really loves me?" The question hit so fast I forgot how to arrange my face. Brenda, polished, ambitious, from the kind of family whose silverware has a story, had felt like a straight line for Garrett's future. I had made myself swallow every small doubt the way you swallow a pill without water because you don't have time to choke. The way her attention drifted when he talked about the landscape projects he sketched at night. The way she checked her phone during dinner, always mid-conversation. The way her father, Judge Holloway, talked about reputations like they were glass figurines. "Why are you asking me this today?" I said, aiming for light, hitting something that sounded like glass. He looked down into his coffee as if an answer lived there. "She's different with Dad." He glanced up. "They talk a lot. About investments, her career, the firm's partners. He says he's mentoring her, but sometimes I feel like I'm," his voice snagged, "an item on a list she needs to check off before real life starts." I reached for his hand. His grip was warm, desperate. "Wedding morning is a cruel mirror," I said. "It makes everything look larger." Truth. I'd seen moments I couldn't name. The way Arthur refilled her glass without asking her preference. The way he knew it anyway. 2 sugars, a trace of cream, as if he'd learned her mouth by heart. The way they leaned toward each other when they talked about money and futures, as if they were sharing a secret constellation only the 2 of them could see. I had explained it all away as generosity. I had trained myself to love the simplest explanation because complicated ones threatened to unwind a whole life. Before I could find words that didn't lie, the door opened again. Arthur breezed in, crisp shirt, kiss and confetti smile. "There are my 2 favorites," he boomed, like a host greeting the head table. He squeezed Garrett's shoulder and dropped a kiss on my hair. The scent of cologne and fresh coffee tangled in my throat. "Big day. I'm grabbing the gift for Brenda's parents. Thought I'd get there before the stores are a circus." "Gift," I said. "That's new." "Last minute thought," he said, eyes sliding past mine to the window, where the arch sat quiet and innocent in the dawn. "Want everything perfect for our boy." His phone buzzed. He tilted the screen away, thumbed something, grinned. "Brenda will be here at 10 to finalize the seating chart. Better to hash it out privately. Her family is particular." "Right," Garrett said, his voice flat as a closed book. Arthur's smile felt as bright and hollow as a stage light. "Son, you should get some rest." To me, softer. "Lore." He caught himself, corrected. "Felicia, you'll run yourself ragged." He left a trail of cheer behind him like confetti nobody wanted to sweep. I sat very still after he'd gone. The house hummed with comfortable noises, air conditioning, a faint tick from the hallway clock, the ice maker coughing into its belly. Nothing sounded different. Everything did. Garrett watched me. "Mom? I want everything to be right," I said, and the word right tasted like a lie I'd paid for in installments. "Go shower. I'll handle the caterer call." He nodded and pushed off the desk. At the door, he hesitated. "If anything feels off today, just believe me." "About what?" "You'll know it when you see it," he said, and left me holding that sentence like a hot coal I wasn't ready to drop. I called the caterer and lied smoothly. "Family emergency. Can we push our final confirmation?" My voice sounded like it belonged to a woman who handled things. The truth, I had no intention of handling anything except the feeling that had begun to creep along my spine like cold fingers. At 9:57, a white BMW glided into our driveway as if the pavement belonged to it. Brenda stepped out in soft jeans and a silk blouse, the kind of casual that takes money to achieve. Even at that hour, she looked curated. Hair catching the light like it had practiced, makeup that whispered, "I just woke up like this." She moved with that unstudied confidence of people who have always been told yes. I stood very still in the kitchen and watched the front door open. Arthur's laugh floated down the hall, and something inside me wavered, then stiffened. I set the dish towel down, left through the back door, and circled the house to the living room bay window. The hydrangeas I'd nurtured for years rustled against my legs like a chorus. From the corner of the glass, I saw them by the fireplace, the photographer's spot for Christmas mornings, the room where Garrett took his first steps, the couch where we read Dr. Seuss until the stitches of the spine loosened. Arthur handed her a glass. His hand curved automatically to the small of her back. It lingered. It didn't look like a slip. It looked like muscle memory. I told myself they were talking about chairs and charts. I told myself good men could be foolish and nothing more. I told myself I was a mother on a wedding day, not a stranger crouched in bushes spying on her life. Then Brenda laughed at something he said, a tilt of her head, eyes soft, and he answered with that quicksilver laugh of his, the one I hadn't heard in years, the one that used to be ours, private as the smell of rain through a screened porch. The sound of it broke something quiet in me. His hand slid into her hair. The kiss was not a mistake. I did not move. The world narrowed to a pane of glass, and two people lit by morning. The roses outside my window nodded, as if the earth itself couldn't decide where to agree. I felt my breath go shallow, a high, tight panic that tasted like electricity. Spit and run, flinch and scream. I braced my hands on the sill, ready to move without plan or logic, ready to reset the furniture of my life with a single act of fury. Before I could stand, a shape shifted in the staircase reflection. Garrett, a still cutout in the shadowed hall upstairs, watching what I watched. He didn't rush, didn't pound, didn't cry. He looked ancient. My anger crumpled into something worse. This wasn't just mine. I slipped back from the window, leaves scratching my arms, as if to write a message I couldn't read. I stepped into the side yard to pull air into my lungs that didn't taste like betrayal. Footsteps whispered behind me. Garrett came through the back door and walked toward me, like a man learning to feel his legs again. "Mom," he said. His voice had a strange, calm hinge to it. "Don't." I looked at him, looked at the house. In my mind, I saw the arch, the chairs, the string lights that would glow like stars this evening. I saw the list I'd kept in my head for weeks, the careful errands, the emailed reminders, the blank lines waiting for checks. I saw a future arranged in tidy rows, and I saw the quick, decisive way Arthur's mouth had claimed a life that wasn't his. "I don't know how to breathe," I said, and it sounded childish, an admission that belonged to a younger woman. Garrett put a hand on my arm, the same way I used to steady him when he was small and feverish. "You don't have to fix it right now," he said. The calm scared me more than any scream. "Believe me when I tell you, this isn't the moment." "Garrett," I breathed, "how long have you—" "Long enough to stop hoping it's not real." He lifted his phone like a small grim flag. "Not here, not like this." Somewhere inside the house, a glass clinked against wood. A laugh, a murmur. The day leaned forward. The hydrangeas lifted their pale heads, as if the light had sweetened. In the clear air, my life stood on a hinge, and though I could not name it yet, I felt the swing begin. My breath came in shallow, ragged waves. Garrett's eyes never left mine, steady and hollow. He had already crossed the line where shock burns itself out and leaves only something sharper, something planned. "Garrett," I whispered, "you should never have had to see this. You should never—" He cut me off with a shake of his head. I'd been seeing it for weeks. His hand trembled as he lifted the phone again. I told myself it was nerves, or that I was overthinking. But it kept happening. Lunches they both lied about, texts at odd hours, and then his jaw clenched. I knew I needed proof. I stared at him. Proof. My son, my gentle, practical boy who once built Lego cities on this lawn, talking like a detective in a crime drama. "Proof," I managed. He tapped the phone, thumb unsteady but determined. The screen lit up. A photograph. Arthur and Brenda walking into the Riverside Hotel. Time-stamped 3 weeks ago. Arthur had sworn he was at a sales conference in Denver that day. The next image, them leaving 2 hours later, her lipstick blurred, his tie loose. My throat closed. Garrett's voice was flat. "I hired someone." The words thudded between us like a confession. "You what?" My voice cracked into 2 different pitches, disbelief and grief. "I needed to know," he said simply. Needed to know I wasn't crazy. That the person I was about to marry wasn't already married in her heart. To him. My knees buckled. I crouched among the hydrangeas, the dirt cool against my palms. For a second, I thought I might vomit. "Garrett," I whispered. Who? Who did you hire?" The faintest shadow of something, shame, relief, crossed his face. A professional. Someone I could trust. Beverly Reed. My pulse jolted. "Beverly?" He nodded. "Your sister." I shut my eyes. Beverly. My estranged sister, retired cop, turned private investigator. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. Pride, distance, old wounds piled too high to climb. And now she had been the one watching my husband with my son's fiancée. The irony was a knife twist. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, but the question had no force. I already knew the answer. He hadn't wanted to break me until he had proof. My son had been protecting me while drowning in betrayal himself. Before I could speak again, the back door opened. Arthur's voice carried out. Too bright, too casual. "Felicia? Garrett? Where'd you 2 wander off to?" Garrett's hand shot out at gripping my wrist. "Don't," he hissed. "Not yet." We froze, half hidden by the bushes. Arthur's footsteps padded closer, then paused. I held my breath so hard my lungs ached. After a long moment, the door closed again, his humming fading as he moved deeper inside. I released the air in a shaky exhale. Garrett leaned close, his voice low and fierce. "You can't confront them now. They'll twist it. They'll cry and deny and make you think you're crazy. Trust me, Mom. We need timing. We need strategy." Strategy. My son sounded like a soldier instead of a groom. I wiped at my face, surprised to find it wet. "I don't want strategy, Garrett. I want my life back." His jaw tightened. "That life is gone." The words hit harder than the photos. Silence stretched, heavy with things we weren't ready to say. Somewhere inside the house, Brenda's laughter floated out, high and easy, followed by Arthur's lower chuckle. The sound turned my stomach. Garrett glanced at the window, then back at me. "This doesn't end here. It ends tomorrow. At the altar, in front of everyone." I stared at him, horrified. "You can't mean—" "I do." His eyes, once so young, carried something cold now. "You and I both know, if we don't expose them in the light, they'll bury us in the dark." I wanted to argue, to tell him revenge would break him more than betrayal had. But in that moment, crouched in the dirt, my husband's kiss still burning behind my eyelids, I couldn't bring myself to say no. Inside, a door slammed. Brenda's voice rose, sharp, then softened again. Arthur's baritone smoothed it like he'd done for me so many times in the past. They laughed once more, and it sounded like a curtain falling on the life I thought I had. Garrett slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Come inside, Mom. Act normal. Let them believe they've fooled us." Normal. The word was obscene. I followed him, legs wooden. In the kitchen, the counters gleamed, the centerpieces sat perfect. The air smelled of cinnamon and polish. On the surface, it was a house ready for celebration, but every corner hummed with deceit. Every wall knew secrets I hadn't been invited to hear. Arthur emerged from the hallway, still carrying that polished smile. "There you 2 are. Brenda's just sorting out the seating. Something about not letting her uncle sit near your Uncle Robert after the Christmas debacle." He chuckled. "God forbid another political debate at the reception." Garrett gave a thin smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Wouldn't want that." Arthur looked between us, suspicion flickering for a heartbeat before his charm smoothed it away. Everything all right? Perfect, I lied, and the word curdled on my tongue. Arthur nodded, kissed my cheek, and strode toward the study. When he disappeared, Garrett leaned closer. His whisper brushed my ear like the edge of a blade. Tonight we plan, with Beverly. My chest tightened. Tonight, with Beverly. I thought of my sister's face, the distance between us, the old wounds never healed. I thought of the man I had loved for 25 years, smiling as if nothing were wrong. I thought of the girl I had once been, the girl who believed stability could be built like a ledger, neat columns, balanced sums. That girl was gone, and the woman left in her place was about to step into a war she never asked for. The hours that followed dragged like a slow bleed. I moved through the house as though on autopilot, folding napkins that were already folded, polishing glasses that already gleamed. Every laugh from the other room scraped down my spine. By mid-afternoon, Garrett slipped out quietly, muttering something about errands. I knew better. He wasn't running away. He was preparing. That left me alone in a house that suddenly felt less like home and more like a stage where I was the only one without a script. At 6, when twilight bruised the edges of the sky, I told Arthur I was going to review some final invoices. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop 20 minutes away, the one with dim lighting and too loud jazz that made eavesdropping nearly impossible. Beverly was already there. She sat in a corner booth, hair clipped back, posture still sharp with that ex-cop alertness. For a moment, my chest ached with all the years between us. Arguments, silences, pride neither of us could unclench. Her eyes softened when she saw me. Felicia. Bev. The name came out like a stone I hadn't wanted to throw. Garrett slid into the booth beside me, his phone clutched like a weapon. He looked exhausted, but there was a new edge in him. Determination. Beverly cut straight to it. You've seen enough to know. I nodded, my throat tightened. I saw. Today. Her lips pressed thin. She reached into her bag and slid a manila folder across the table. And this is what I've seen for the last 3 weeks. I hesitated, then opened it. Photographs. Pages of them. Arthur and Brenda in restaurants, in parking lots, entering hotels. Always casual, always intimate. My stomach turned with every image. But the folder didn't stop there. Bank withdrawals, copies of forged signatures, transfers that leapt from our joint account like blood draining from a vein. I forced myself to ask, how far does it go? Beverly leaned forward, her voice lowering. Further than you want to hear. Something in her tone made Garrett still. Tell us. She held my gaze. This isn't his first betrayal. For 15 years, Arthur's been sending regular payments, monthly, quiet, cash transfers, to a woman named Victoria Sterling. The name was a stranger's, but dread made it taste familiar. Who is she? An old associate from his firm. She left suddenly around the time Garrett was a child. Beverly's eyes sharpened. She has a daughter, Haley, 15 years old. No father listed on the birth certificate, but... She paused, as if bracing herself. I'd stake my license Arthur is the father. The air thickened. Garrett sat back hard against the booth, the color draining from his face. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles burned. A child, I whispered. He's had a child all this time? Beverly slid a photograph forward. A candid shot of a girl stepping out of a school gate, dark hair pulled back, a book tucked under her arm. Her smile, too familiar. Arthur's smile. My stomach lurched. I pressed the photo down as if I could shove it back into the envelope, back into a world where it wasn't real. No, he would have told me. But the words broke. He hadn't told me. And the silence of 15 years screamed louder than any confession. Garrett's voice was ragged. So all those nights he said he was working late. The weekends he said he was on golf trips. Beverly nodded grimly. He was funding her life, Felicia. Quietly, consistently. That's where the money was going. I felt myself unravel. 25 years of partnership, of compromise, of believing I was building something stable, and he'd been siphoning pieces of it away for another family. For a girl my son never knew existed. I covered my face with my hands. Heat rose behind my eyes, but the tears wouldn't fall. I wasn't sure I had any left. Garrett's hand landed on my shoulder. Mom, he said quietly, you're not alone. Not anymore. I lifted my head, met his eyes. He looked older than his years, older than I wanted him to be. Beverly slid another sheet across the table. This time, not photographs. Legal documents. Loan papers from my retirement account. The signature. My name, but not my hand. I blinked. He forged my name? Her expression was carved from stone. He's been bleeding your 401k for 18 months. Nearly 60,000 gone. Cash. Always cash. A laugh escaped me, sharp and broken. So my husband isn't just a liar and a cheater. He's a thief. Garrett's voice was cold steel. Then let's take everything from him the way he took from us. Garrett, I said, warning and plea tangled together. But Beverly surprised me by nodding. He's right. If you confront Arthur in private, he'll spin it. He'll twist it. You'll walk away wondering if you're the one losing your mind. Public is the only way. I swallowed hard. At the wedding? Yes, Beverly said. Her voice was low, steady, merciless. Where the whole town will be watching. Where his lies can't hide. Garrett leaned forward, his eyes dark, his voice carrying a conviction that chilled me. We end them in front of everyone. I stared at him, my boy who once built Lego castles, now plotting the demolition of his father's. And the terrifying part wasn't his words. It was that I believed them. The jazz song ended, a silence held, heavier than music. I closed the folder, my hands trembling. Then we need a plan. The three of us sat there, the folder between us like a live wire. The dim cafe light painted shadows across Beverly's face, making her look both like my sister and like someone I hadn't known in years. What kind of plan? I asked, though I already feared the answer. Beverly folded her hands, every movement precise, like she'd rehearsed this 100 times. We collect evidence. We control the stage. And when the time is right, we cut the curtain. Garrett leaned in. The wedding. She nodded. Exactly. 100 pairs of eyes, maybe more. His colleagues, Brenda's family, the judge, everyone who matters to them. That's where it'll hurt the most. That's where it'll be undeniable. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to quiet the drumbeat of my heart. You want to destroy them at the altar? Garrett's mouth twisted. They already destroyed themselves. We're just letting the world see it. The certainty in his voice unsettled me. My son, my gentle, overthinking boy, sounded like a man sharpening a blade. Beverly slid another document out. I'll need a DNA sample. If Haley is Arthur's daughter, we'll need proof. Something that can't be denied. The air left my lungs. Haley. That girl's face haunted me. The ghost of Arthur's smile trapped on a teenager's mouth. How? I asked. Simple, Beverly said. Toothbrush, razor, hair from his comb, anything he's touched. I gripped the edge of the booth. That feels violating. She met my eyes, steady, unflinching. Felicia, he violated you for 15 years. This is nothing. The truth of it cut deeper than her words. Garrett shifted beside me. I'll help. Tonight, when he's asleep. I turned to him sharply. No, you're not stealing DNA samples from your father. You're supposed to be preparing for your wedding day. His laugh was hollow. My wedding? To who? To a thief? To Dad's mistress? That wedding's already over, Mom. We just haven't buried it yet. The words hit me harder than the photographs. I reached for his hand, but he pulled it back, curling his fingers into a fist on the table. Beverly's voice softened, surprising me. Felicia, listen. This isn't just about Arthur cheating. It's about fraud, theft, years of lies. Brenda's not innocent either. She's embezzled over 200 grand from her law firm, and I can prove it. If she marries Garrett, all that filth bleeds straight into your family. I closed my eyes. The cafe noise dimmed, as though the whole world leaned in to listen. So tomorrow, I said slowly, we don't just stop a wedding, we detonate everything. Garrett's jaw clenched. Exactly. I looked at my sister, at the neat pile of damning evidence she'd laid out. I thought about the roses strung along the arch, the white chairs lined up like soldiers waiting for orders, the string lights that would glitter when the sun went down. I had wanted a perfect day for my son. Instead, I was about to give him a battlefield. I'll get the toothbrush, I said. Beverly's eyes softened, just for a moment. Good. Once I have it, I'll run it through a private lab. We'll have preliminary results before the ceremony. And if it's true, I whispered, if Haley is his... It is true, Beverly said quietly. You saw her face. You already know. I pressed my lips together until I tasted blood. Garrett finally unclenched his fist. Then it settled. Tomorrow we end this. The decision sat heavy in the space between us. Not relief, not triumph, just inevitability. When we finally left, the night air felt too sharp, too clean against my skin. I drove home in silence, Garrett's profile hard in the passenger seat. We passed houses with glowing windows, families laughing, televisions flickering. Ordinary lives, unbroken ones. When we pulled into the driveway, Arthur's car was already there. The lights in our bedroom glowed warm through the window. For a moment, the house looked innocent, like it always had. But I knew better. That night, after Arthur drifted into a deep snore beside me, I slid from the bed. My bare feet kissed the cold floorboards. I moved to the bathroom, heart hammering with each step. The toothbrush sat in its cup, ordinary and damning. My hand trembled as I lifted it, slid it into the plastic bag Beverly had given me. It felt like stealing a piece of him, like trespassing into a part of our marriage I'd never wanted to see. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, wondering if this was the moment my old life officially died. Then I sealed the bag. At dawn, I slipped it into the mailbox for Beverly. When Arthur stirred later, stretching and yawning, he smiled at me like he hadn't spent the day before with his son's fiancée. He kissed my shoulder and said, "Today's going to be beautiful, Felicia. Perfect." I smiled back, and I thought, yes, perfect, for the end of you. The morning of the wedding was like stepping into a dream I couldn't wake from. The house buzzed with florists, photographers, caterers, voices rising and falling like background noise in a movie. Everyone smiled, complimented, fluttered around with ribbons and bouquets. To them, it was a day for joy. To me, it was the day a fuse burned steadily toward detonation. I moved through it like a ghost. I pinned boutonniere, handed out directions, nodded at relatives I hadn't seen in years. My mouth said the right things, but inside I was counting down hours. Arthur thrived in the chaos. He shook hands with the caterers, charmed the florist, even lifted a box of wine as if he were still the young man I once thought invincible. Every so often, his eyes landed on me, warm, proud, almost tender. And each time, bile rose in my throat. How easy it was for him to play this role, how seamless his lies. At 10 sharp, my phone buzzed, a single message from Beverly. Confirmed 99.999%. Haley is his. The screen blurred. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the phone clutched so tight my knuckles whitened. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. 15 years of deceit sealed in a few clinical words. A hidden daughter. A stolen family. My husband had been a stranger sleeping beside me for more than a decade. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But what filled me instead was something colder, something sharper than grief. A steel resolve. When I finally stood, Garrett was in the doorway, already dressed in his tuxedo. His tie hung loose, his hair slightly mussed, his expression unreadable. "You heard from her," he said quietly. I nodded. "It's true." His jaw tightened. "Then there's no turning back." I searched his face for some flicker of the boy he used to be, the boy who built tree houses and asked too many questions. But all I saw was the man betrayal had carved out of him, hard edges where soft had been. I touched his arm. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" He met my eyes. "Are you?" I didn't answer. The silence was enough. By afternoon, the yard was a stage. White chairs gleamed under the sun. The roses draped across the arch glowed crimson, as if mocking me with their beauty. The string quartet tuned their instruments. The photographer adjusted his lenses. Guests streamed in, dressed in silk and suits, chattering, laughing, oblivious. Arthur worked the crowd like a politician. He shook hands, kissed cheeks, laughed with Judge Holloway. To anyone watching, he was the proud father of the groom. But I knew better. I saw the secret glances he and Brenda shared, small flickers of triumph. They thought they'd won. Beverly was there too, disguised as catering staff, moving with practiced ease. I caught her eye once across the lawn. She gave the smallest nod. The laptop was connected to the projector, the remote tucked in her pocket. Everything was in place. At 5 minutes to 4, I took my seat in the front row. Arthur slipped in beside me, his hand resting on mine as though we were the couple being celebrated. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he murmured. I forced a smile. "Perfect." Then the music swelled. Brenda appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in lace, her veil catching the light like spun sugar. The crowd gasped, sighed, whispered. She smiled, wide and glowing, but her eyes flicked past Garrett, landing on Arthur for the briefest second. And in that look, I saw it all. The secret, the arrogance, the certainty that she had secured everything she wanted. Garrett stood at the altar, his face a careful mask. When their eyes met, he took her hand, but his grip was stiff. Only I could see the truth. My son was a soldier about to march into battle. The minister began, his voice warm, words about love and fidelity floating over the crowd. The irony was so sharp, it nearly cut me in half. When the moment came, those words every wedding hides like a tripwire. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined. A hush fell. Arthur squeezed my hand lightly, as if daring me. I stood. The gasp rippled through the crowd, swift and electric. Heads turned, eyes locked on me, confusion and curiosity sparking like fire through dry grass. Felicia, Arthur hissed under his breath, his smile frozen. Sit down. Don't do this. But I was already turning toward the minister, my voice carrying louder than I thought it could. I do. The silence that followed was a living thing. I have a reason this marriage should not proceed. Gasps, murmurs. Brenda's father began to rise, thunder etched into his face. Brenda's smile faltered, confusion sharpening into fear. Garrett's mask didn't move, but his eyes were steady, locked on mine, giving me strength. Arthur's grip on my arm tightened. Felicia, stop this madness. You're humiliating our son. I shook him off. My voice dropped into a deadly calm. No, Arthur, you humiliated him, and now everyone deserves to know the truth. My hand slipped into my purse, fingers curling around the small remote Beverly had given me. I pressed the button. The screen behind the altar flickered, and then a photograph appeared, crystal clear. Arthur and Brenda, locked in a kiss by our fireplace. The crowd erupted. The air shattered like glass. Gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs. A woman in the third row clapped her hand over her mouth. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." The string quartet faltered into silence, one violinist dropping her bow. On the screen, the image hung unforgiving. Arthur's hand tangled in Brenda's hair, Brenda leaning into him with a smile no bride should wear for anyone but her groom. Brenda's face blanched beneath the veil. This is fake," she stammered, her voice cracking. Some sick trick." Arthur shot to his feet, red blotches rising on his neck. "Turn that off," he barked, his eyes darting across the guests, seeking an ally, an explanation. I didn't move. My voice carried steady and cold. "It's not a trick. It's the truth." The screen shifted. Another photo. Arthur and Brenda entering the Riverside Hotel, timestamp glowing in the corner. Another. The two of them slipping out hours later, disheveled, her lipstick smeared, his tie loose. Then another. A collage of secret meetings. A wave of horrified murmurs swept the crowd. Brenda's father, the judge, stood abruptly, his voice thunder. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," I said, turning to face him with a calm I didn't feel, "is that your daughter has been lying to my son, sleeping with his father, and attempting to marry into this family on a foundation of deceit." Brenda's mother swayed, gripping her pearls as though they might anchor her. Arthur stepped forward, hands raised like a conductor trying to quiet an orchestra. "This is insane. These are doctored images. Lorraine, Felicia has lost her mind." "No, Arthur," I said evenly. "I've simply found it." Click. The next slide. Forged documents, his signature over mine, bank statements, cash withdrawals. The Tiffany's receipt for a necklace Brenda had worn proudly at her bridal shower. "This man," I said, my voice slicing the air, "forged my name. He drained our retirement account to fund his affair. He stole from me, from our future." The crowd gasped again. Faces turned, some angry, some stunned, some eager for every sordid detail. And then another click. Brenda froze. Her own embezzlement records blazed across the screen. Fake invoices, wire transfers, the shell company, $200,000 siphoned out of her law firm. Gasps turned to outrage. A man in the fourth row, one of her colleagues, half rose from his chair, his face twisted with fury. "You little thief," he spat. Brenda's legs buckled. She gripped the altar rail. This isn't..." But the screen didn't wait. The DNA results appeared. Bold letters, clinical and cruel. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Next to it, the photo of Haley Sterling, smiling, innocent, 15 years of lies written into her face. A silence fell, heavier than all the noise before it. 300 people staring at the proof of Arthur's secret child. My throat tightened, but my words rang clear. This is Haley, my husband's daughter, concealed from me, concealed from his son, concealed for 15 years. The silence cracked. Someone sobbed. Someone else cursed under their breath. Brenda swayed, her veil slipping sideways. Then she crumpled to the floor, a heap of lace and shame. Her mother rushed forward, but the judge only stood there, his face gray with humiliation. Arthur stared at the screen, then at me, then at the crowd. Rage and panic warred in his eyes. "Felicia, you vindictive—" But his words drowned beneath the roar of voices, the chaos of 300 guests realizing they weren't attending a wedding, but a public execution. Arthur bolted, shoved past chairs, past stunned relatives, his polished shoes slipping on the grass. He ran toward the parking lot like a man chased by his own sins. But Beverly was waiting. Still in her catering uniform, she stepped out from behind the oak tree, her posture casual. As Arthur barreled past, she hooked her foot neatly. He went sprawling, crashing into the manicured lawn with a thud that sent dust and grass flying. "Going somewhere, Artie?" Beverly said coolly, standing over him. Arthur rolled onto his side, mud staining his crisp shirt, fury blazing in his eyes. "Get out of my way." But he froze when two uniformed officers appeared from the edge of the crowd, pushing through the stunned guests. "Not for him, for her." "Brenda Holloway?" one officer called out, his voice clear, authoritative. Brenda, still on the ground in her wedding dress, looked up, eyes wide, lips trembling. "No, no, please. You are under arrest for suspicion of embezzlement and wire fraud." The officer's partner moved smoothly, clicking handcuffs around her wrists. The metallic snap echoed across the stunned silence. Gasps. Camera phones raised. Brenda sobbed, mascara streaking down her face, as her parents watched their daughter, their golden child, led away in chains on the very day she thought she'd become a bride. Garrett stood at the altar, pale but unflinching, his hands clenched into fists. He didn't move until his gaze found mine, and then, slowly, he stepped down, walked to me, and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "It's over, Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking just enough to remind me he was still my boy. "It's finally over." I looked around, at the collapsed bride, at the humiliated father, at my husband pinned to the grass under my sister's watch, at the guests, some weeping, some gawking, some leaving in hurried clusters. And for the first time in months, I let myself breathe. Blue and red lights painted the street outside as dusk settled. What should have been champagne toasts and dancing under string lights had turned into flashing sirens, hushed statements, and the heavy scrape of folding chairs being packed away. The caterers moved like ghosts, carrying untouched trays of hors d'oeuvres back to their vans. Guests whispered in clusters, some slipping away quickly to avoid being caught in the scandal, others lingering, hungry for every scrap of drama. Brenda, in her ruined dress, was escorted into the back of a patrol car. Her veil snagged on the doorframe. The officer tugged it free with all the gentleness of bureaucracy. She sat crumpled inside, her face streaked, her wrists cuffed, as the cameras from curious onlookers captured the fall of the Holloway's golden daughter. Her mother sobbed silently beside the car. Her father stood stiff, jaw locked, knowing his career would never outrun this humiliation. Arthur had been questioned and released. He hadn't spoken to me, hadn't spoken to Garrett. He simply slipped into his car, clothes still stained from the lawn, and drove off without a word. Watching his taillights vanish felt like watching 25 years shrink to a single point of red and disappear. Inside the house, I found Garrett in the kitchen. He was still in his tuxedo, jacket off, tie loosened, hair damp from sweat. He stood at the counter, eating a sandwich as though he'd just come back from a long shift, not from detonating his own wedding. "How are you holding up?" I asked softly. He chewed, swallowed, then looked at me. His eyes were calm, older somehow. "Relieved," he said. "For the first time in months, Mom, I can actually breathe." My throat tightened. "And how are you? Really?" He considered, then gave a small wry smile. "Hungry, tired, and glad it's done." I wanted to say something about resilience, about how proud I was, but the words caught in the tangle of grief and rage still coiled inside me. Instead, I just reached out and brushed a crumb from his lapel, the way I used to when he was little. The next few weeks blurred into a storm of consequences. The scandal swept through town like wildfire. Headlines blared. Wedding day scandal. Fiancé arrested. Father of groom implicated. News vans idled on our street for days. My phone rang endlessly. Reporters, distant cousins, old acquaintances, suddenly curious. I stopped answering. My small accounting business suffered. A few loyal clients stayed, but several quietly moved their accounts elsewhere, unwilling to be tied to a woman whose family was front page shame. I swallowed the loss, reminding myself I'd survived worse. Brenda pled guilty. The evidence was overwhelming, courtesy of Beverly's meticulous file. She accepted a deal. 2 years in a low-security prison, full restitution to her law firm. Her reputation, her career, her golden future, all gone. Arthur's collapse was quieter, but no less complete. He resigned from his job, cornered by whispers of fraud and betrayal. He lost colleagues, friends, standing. He moved into a cramped apartment across town, and from what Beverly's contacts told us, he rarely showed his face in public. The man who once commanded every room had dwindled to a shadow slipping through back doors. But the most complicated consequence came 2 weeks later, folded in a plain envelope, a letter. It was from Victoria Sterling. Her handwriting was neat, restrained. She apologized for the pain. For the past she said she hadn't known how to undo. She admitted Haley, her daughter, had seen the news and now knew the truth. And Haley wanted to meet us. The letter shook in my hands. How do you prepare for meeting the child who represents 15 years of lies? The daughter of the man you thought you knew? The sister your son never asked for? I showed the letter to Garrett. He read it silently, then looked up. His answer came without hesitation. I want to meet her, he said. She's your half-sister, I whispered. She's my sister, he corrected, firm. She deserves to know her family, or what's left of it. So I made the call. We arranged to meet in a coffee shop halfway between our towns. Neutral ground. I spent the days before sick with dread. When the morning came, I nearly backed out. But Garrett's steady hand on mine pulled me forward. Victoria arrived first. She looked older than I remembered from the single photograph Beverly had shown me. Tired, wary, shoulders carrying too many secrets. Behind her walked Haley. And when I saw her, the world tilted. She had Arthur's eyes, the same dark, intelligent spark that once made me fall in love with him. She clutched a book to her chest like a shield, her expression guarded but curious. She was just a girl, an innocent who had been dragged into this labyrinth of betrayal without a choice. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then Garrett smiled, soft, tentative, and said, "Hi, I'm Garrett. I guess I'm your brother." Haley's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Hi." I sat there, staring at her, torn between fury at what she represented and an ache I couldn't name. She wasn't the enemy. She was a child. She was my son's sister. And in that moment, I realized betrayal had destroyed my marriage, but it hadn't destroyed my ability to love. The weeks that followed our meeting with Haley were some of the strangest of my life. At first, every encounter felt like stepping barefoot across broken glass, careful, hesitant, afraid of drawing blood. But little by little, the edges softened. Garrett took the lead. He texted her often, asked about her classes, about the books she carried everywhere. They discovered a shared obsession with old movies, and one night I found them on the couch, laughing over Casablanca like they'd known each other for years. Watching them, I felt a strange tug inside me. A bond was forming, fragile but real. I began inviting Haley for dinner every other Sunday. At first she was shy, polite, answering in clipped sentences, but over time she opened up, telling stories about school projects, her love of drawing, her dream of becoming an architect. Each time she spoke, I saw Garrett listening intently, as though he was making up for 15 years of silence. I thought it might break me, seeing Arthur's features echoed in her, but it didn't. Instead, it reminded me that the sins of a parent don't define the child. Haley wasn't a secret to be hidden. She was a person, and slowly I began to feel a protective warmth for her. She became part of us, not by blood alone, but by choice. Meanwhile, my own life began to rebuild. I sold the big family house with its backyard ghosts and bought a smaller townhouse, modest, manageable, quiet. My business, though scarred, started to recover. Loyal clients returned, and new ones arrived, drawn by my honesty in the wake of scandal. There was something cleansing about losing everything and surviving it. Garrett, too, was transforming. He left his corporate job, the one he had taken to please Arthur, and returned to his true passion, landscape architecture. He designed gardens and courtyards that seemed to heal the earth itself. Watching him sketch in the evenings, brow furrowed in focus, I realized he was designing not just spaces, but his own future. He even began to smile again. A real smile. Not the guarded one he wore during the engagement, but something freer. And when he introduced me to a young woman named Clara, a librarian with kind eyes and an easy laugh, I saw a light in him I thought I'd lost forever. A year passed. The scandal faded from headlines. Brenda served her sentence. Her family's name, once so polished, was a shadow of what it had been. Arthur vanished from most circles, until one evening the doorbell rang. I opened it to find him standing there. He looked smaller, thinner, his hair grayer, his eyes hollow. Gone was the man who commanded attention with a smile. What stood before me was someone humbled, stripped bare. "Felicia," he said quietly, "can I come in?" For a moment I thought about slamming the door, but instead I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of my sofa like a guest, unsure of his welcome. "I'm in therapy," he said after a long silence. "I'm trying to understand why I did what I did." His hands shook slightly. "I'm sorry for the lies, for Haley, for Brenda, for everything I took from you." I listened. His words sounded sincere, but sincerity doesn't rewrite history. "I forgive you, Arthur," I said at last. His head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise. "But not for you," I continued. "For me. I can't carry the weight of that anger anymore. It's too heavy. I forgive you so I can breathe again. But I will never trust you, and we will never go back." His lips trembled, eyes wet. He nodded, slowly, like a man absorbing a sentence he knew he deserved. "I know," he whispered. Then he left, shoulders bent, vanishing into the night. Later, as I stood brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I thought of the woman I had been a year ago, the one crouched behind the hydrangeas, watching her life collapse through glass. She had been broken, lost, convinced her world had ended. I wished I could tell her, yes, it will end, but something else will begin. Because betrayal had shattered the family I thought I had. But in its place, something smaller, quieter, and truer had formed. Garrett, Haley, and me. Imperfect, scarred, but honest. And that, finally, was enough. Time moved differently after that night. Without Arthur's shadow in every corner, the air in my townhouse felt lighter, the silence no longer oppressive but peaceful. I began to notice small things again. The warmth of morning sunlight spilling across the kitchen table, the sound of Haley's laughter mixing with Garrett's when they teased each other over board games, the satisfaction of planting herbs in pots on my balcony and watching them thrive. Life wasn't perfect. It was raw, unfinished, patched together with threads of grief and resilience. But it was mine. Haley became a steady presence. She would come over after school sometimes, curling on the couch with her sketches while I worked at the dining table. Once she asked me, timidly, if she could call me Felicia instead of Mrs. Vale. The way she smiled when I said yes reminded me that love, once planted, could grow in even the unlikeliest soil. Garrett flourished. His landscape projects began to attract attention. One of his designs, a public park revitalization, was even featured in the local paper. I kept a copy folded neatly in my desk drawer, a quiet trophy of survival. He still carried scars, I knew. Nights when he would sit on the porch staring into the dark, silent for hours. But he was healing. He was building something new from the rubble, and I was proud. I was healing too. The bitterness that once consumed me had dulled into something quieter. Not forgiveness, not for Arthur, not for Brenda, but acceptance. The past couldn't be rewritten, but the future, that was still malleable, still ours to shape. One evening, Haley set her sketchbook down and asked, "Do you think people ever stop making mistakes?" The question startled me. "No," I said gently, "but I think we can stop letting those mistakes define us." She thought about that for a moment, then nodded. In her eyes, I didn't just see Arthur anymore. I saw possibility. A girl stepping out from under the weight of secrets she never asked for, finding her place in a family that wasn't planned, but was real. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The media frenzy died down, replaced by fresher scandals. My business grew again. Garrett started talking about maybe proposing to Clara one day, and Haley. Haley began to laugh without hesitation, as though the shadow of her father's lies no longer dictated the light in her life. One night, a year to the day since the wedding that wasn't, I stood on my balcony. The hydrangeas bloomed in pots around me, their heads heavy with color. I thought about that morning I'd crouched behind their cousins in the yard of my old house, heartbreaking as I watched betrayal unfold. That woman had thought her life was ending. In a way, it had. But standing there, breathing in the night air, I realized something profound. Sometimes endings are the only way to make room for beginnings. I lost a husband, a future I thought was mine, the illusion of a family built on lies. But I gained something truer, a son who had found his strength, a daughter who had been hidden but now was found, and myself, stripped bare, scarred, but free. The world I had known had burned to ash, but from it, something fragile and honest had grown. And for the first time in a very long time, I whispered to the night, "This is enough."